everyone, and welcome to the Snow Horse Marketing Podcast. We're excited to have you listening in today. Today, we have Matt with us. He is a digital marketing expert who is really specialized in doing marketing for podcasts. Thank you for being here today, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So I know we were talking earlier a little bit about how both of us have really hit the gas on podcasts this year. I mean, there's been a lot that's happened with COVID. Tons of podcasts came in and then tons died. And then this year especially, a lot has been going on in the podcast world. So tell me a little bit, what has surprised you as you've really been delving into podcasts this year?
The positive surprise is honestly just the sense of community that you get doing podcasting. And those people that have been in podcasting for a while, there's really a sense of respect for longevity, right? There's a lot of people who dabble and they go into it and then they give up before 10 episodes, usually after 2 episodes. But there's a lot of respect in the community with longevity, and it really is a community. So a lot of these people know each other and they communicate. And if you just make connections and do right by one of them, they'll be happy to pass your message on. It's great.
I really do love that it's kind of word of mouth, and there's kind of set systems. There's about 3 main ways people go about booking people on podcasts. But again, there is that so much respect for someone being willing to be consistent. I'm amazed how many people come to us with podcasts that they do for their company. We see that they've done like 3 in a year. And you really don't get that longevity impact without consistency. So what would you recommend for someone in the podcast world or someone who has a company podcast that's just really struggled with getting past that 10 mark or getting into a consistent flow? What's a recommendation you would have for them?
I guess just like batching your content, right? So if you just sit down and you have a topic of conversation, you can batch that into, it doesn't have to be hour-long episodes. If you run out of things to talk about, you can sit down and batch it. So if you have 2 hours worth of good conversation, you can split that into a couple different episodes. But I guess one of the tips that I've heard for launching, especially like if you're getting started, is you want to launch with some episodes in the bag, right? 10 episodes in the bag, because you want it to be binge worthy right off the bat. Because if somebody's interested in it, they want to hear what else you have to say, and they don't want to have to wait another month for you to come out with one more podcast. But consistency with anything is just, it's same as posting and same with anything. You just have to find a way to get through that funk and try something new. But it's not that hard. You just have to try and keep going. That's really it. Like, doing is better than not. You just have to do it and figure it out, I guess.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm all for successful people do it now, shove people into the deep end mentality. For sure.
Yeah, you can't see around 2 corners. You have no idea what's going to happen. You just got to start.
One thing that I will share with our listeners that we have done here at Snow Horse is I just don't have a lot of bandwidth to do long podcasts and depth podcasts. So when we decided to branch out into podcasts, what we decided is we're just doing, as our listeners know, we do 15 to potentially 30-minute podcasts, and I block out time every Friday for people to come in. This Friday in particular, we're actually doing one back to back. After you, Matt, I got another one for another 15 minutes, and then we just process, as you recommend, just process them all together, and then we delay the launch. And we wanted to do once a week, but we realized we just didn't have the bandwidth to be doing once a week, so we do once every other week. And I love the question. I always encourage anyone trying something new. The question isn't, can you do it perfectly? Can you do the best case scenario? The question to ask yourself is, what can we do? Instead of what is the best way to do it, what can we do? What is that first step? And you'll even see in our podcast, from our first one earlier this year to where we are now, we are steadily improving, from our intros to the types of guests, to preparing our guests, to promoting out the event. Like, we just, every month we're doing that 1% improvement, and that alone is enough to make it work.
Yeah, that's some Atomic Habits stuff, right? So it's incremental growth, right? That's fantastic. I love it.
Oh, I completely agree. So one last question that I had for you, and maybe we'll have another one, is What is a recommendation that you have if someone is starting brand new and they've never done they don't know anything about this community? What would be the best way for them to start being part of the community so they can have those people around them that they can ask the questions to, the maybe quote unquote stupid questions? How do I publish? Where do I host it at? Those types of things. What would be a really good first step for those individuals?
Networking, right? So that's what we did. And you have to start somewhere all the time. So you find people and you be honest, right? So find people in the community, find podcasters, find podcast hosts, and be like, listen, I'm new to podcasting. I'm looking to learn any tips you can share would be really helpful. It'd be awesome. I appreciate it. And odds are that, especially in this community, people are so willing to help, and there's such a camaraderie. It's really great. But there's so many tools and so many things for you to get started and get going, and so many tips and things out there. But I mean, if you just get a general sense of things and, come up with some questions to ask people, or, just cold networking, just, hey, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions about your podcast? Or start listening to podcasts. That's a good start. So, and just good old fashioned networking, meet people, focus on meeting people, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I know we got our start and kind of some good direction. I did podcast years ago, and everything's changed from like 7 years ago when podcasts were coming out. And I know that we really got into it because we were doing some sales discovery calls with some awesome, business owners who they loved what we talked about. We loved what they did. And they're like, hey, why don't you join our podcast? So we were actually invited on as a guest to a couple of podcasts. And what I always did is I asked a couple questions, like, where do you host? All of them. Like most of them screen shared, showed me exactly which tools they used. And we created a process for ourselves based upon those conversations. So sometimes being willing to give into the community, like be a good guest, being willing to share with others, a lot of times that can open the doors to getting some useful information to create your own process.
Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Matt. If someone wanted to learn more about promoting their podcast or doing some marketing around their podcast, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you, Matt?
So we're at Chimehouse Media on all social platforms, usually just on Facebook and Instagram, or we're at chimehousemedia.com. Right now we have we're in the middle of a beta launch of a course called the Podcast Audience Amplifier. And we're teaching podcasters how to run their own Facebook ad audience building strategy. So Facebook and Instagram. But
I love that. And you guys, just so you know, he does podcasts, but he's brilliant at Facebook. This man knows his Facebook. So definitely good information there. Go ahead, go over and check it out. For our listeners, as you know, you're always welcome to listen to us on Spotify. Check us out on YouTube if you're wanting to watch the recordings. And as always, you can find me on LinkedIn. We are excited to have you here, and thanks for listening in.